What do you do when you're on a long stretch waiting for the next Halo game to finally release? Well, typically what we end up doing is playing through older Halo games and try to find different ways to explore levels and maybe discover some new things we never saw along the way. And with all the amount of time that we've spent on ODST, whether we're looking at things like glyphs or J-signs, we have had quite some fun trying to find different ways to completely break out of the maps and various levels throughout the game. So what if we tried to make a challenge out of it and break out of every single level in Halo 3 ODST? And what could we possibly discover along the way? But first, before we get fully into this video, have you ever wondered, what if Rookie wanted to start his own knitting blog and he needed a website? Well, he probably would use Squarespace, which actually is the sponsor of this video. We'll talk a little bit about that more at the end of this video. Okay, back on topic. This is what ended up happening when we tried to break out of every level in ODST. Starting things off on Mombasa Streets, if you actually take 2 mongooses over to this building that has the space elevator symbol by it, and then sync a double grenade throw with another player, and of course have the tilt skull on and the cowbell skull as it accelerates the explosions, and it also, with the tilt skull, gives the vehicles a little bit extra armor to withstand the firepower. You can then launch a mongoose on top of the building, and then what we can do from there is have another player do a grenade launch with another mongoose over by the shield door, and then from there the player that is on top can take the mongoose that you launched up there, and then from there teleport the other players over to the mongoose, and oddly enough you end up having completely free range to drive around and see a really unique aerial view of all of Mombasa Streets and all of the districts. Matter of fact, you can even go and get a close-up of those skyscrapers you always see in the background of the skybox, and even better, you can do a mongoose launch to launch yourself up in the air on top of the skyscrapers if you really want to, just because the fact that mongooses can just slam an ODST into orbit is kind of a funny feature about this game. This was one of the first ones that Tepic showed us in ODST, and it was so cool just to explore the outer realms of the Mombasa Streets area. And even though the city isn't formed in the way you would think it would be or you would imagine it, because how you see it in the skybox in the background, it is still kind of close to get up and close to the buildings, and oddly enough they still feel like in a live city despite the very obvious visual discrepancies. Going over to Tayari Plaza, this was another one that Tepic has shown us before, but if you can line up some players over by the shield door at the very beginning area, you can actually jump up onto the shield barrier, and from there you can manipulate through different types of invisible barriers along the way and push yourself over to the outside section where you're able to then drop down onto the other side of the shield. It's kind of cool because this gives you access to the daytime version of District 6. There's not too much extra stuff you can do here, though you can go over and see Squidhenge during the day, which is neat. Over on Uplift Reserve, there's actually a very large section that you can end up exploring, which is really unique. At the end of the level, where you typically are supposed to drive your Warthog off of the map, you can climb up on some of the debris, and with a few precise jumps, and honestly you want to make sure you don't fall off, because if you fall off, game over, you gotta restart or hope your teammate makes it and you can teleport on them. But if you're pro enough at parkour and navigating the invisible textures at times when you're playing through an out of the map area like in ODST, you do have access to a pretty large area completely outside of the map of Uplift Reserve, and it's cool to just go and look around. On Kazingo Boulevard, later in the level, when you have the tank, there's this section over here where there is a shield door, and if your parkour skills are good enough, you can actually jump up on a street light, and then you can jump on top of the barrier and do some friendly head jumping to get on top of the building right next to the shield. From there, you actually have access to some rooftops, and you can even go as far as seeing the destroyed elevator up close on top of the building. Also, if you drop back down into the level, you end up being in District 3, and there's also this really unique smear texture that's special to ODST whenever we seem to break out of some of these levels. Okay, and then when we moved along to the Oni building, there's this really cool glitch that allows you to get up on top of the walls of this level, and it's it's really interesting how you can pull this one off. Essentially, if the host player utilizes the last checkpoint tool in the menu at the exact right moment, another player can go and hijack a wraith, and in turn, loading that checkpoint backwards will put that player who was hijacking the wraith still mounted up on the wraith at the beginning of the reload, meaning that all of a sudden a player or an ODST is just hanging on to a wraith that's clipped to a phantom flying through the air, and that alone is pretty hilarious. But if you time it right and jump off at just the right moment, you can actually glide down and hopefully not break your ankles in the process and land up on top of this wall, and you can see the other side and the area you just came from, except it kind of deloaded once those doors closed, so it looks quite different, and you definitely know you're not in an area you're supposed to be, but it is a cool trick nonetheless, and it wasn't that hard to set up as long as you make sure you have your checkpoints kind of landing in a relatively good place so that you can pull this one off in order. And having a third player to use a plasma pistol to stun the wraith makes it a lot easier to time the last checkpoint and the jump on the wraith at the same time. So if you're trying to figure out why you're having trouble with it, maybe try using a plasma pistol as well. Okay, so when we get to NMPDHQ, this level's pretty linear. There's not a lot of different places you can end up going, though we discovered a really cool one that we didn't think even existed. And what ended up happening is on this level, if you just walk off the building right here, there's this very subtle invisible barrier that will slow your fall down to the point where you can then kind of use that momentum to jump your way back onto this tiny platform all the way down into the lower section of this level. Honestly, there's no real purpose about having these small barriers, though if you're playing it with 4 players, you get all 4 players down there, there's just a lot of chaos that can ensue. If you start having fights with other people, you can start respawn trapping people falling off the edge, but even though it respawns them falling off the edge, they still have a chance to land back on if they kind of jump at the right time. So then it becomes this really back and forth weird battle, and maybe we're just really toxic players, but we found so much enjoyment out of this little discovery that we had a lot of fun. Okay, so before we get into the Kikowani Station level and the levels that follow, we wanted to thank Squarespace again for sponsoring this video. If you guys don't know about Squarespace yet, they're the best website hosting and building service that's out there, and whether you want to promote your business or you just want to run a simple blog, Squarespace has a ton of different templates for any type of website, and after looking through their many unique options that they have, you can then choose a design and easily customize things like layouts, animations, fonts, and much more with just a few clicks, which makes it really easy to use and jump in for people with no website building experience. But Squarespace isn't just an online building tool. They also have one of the best analytics tools out there, providing you with statistics on where people visit your website from, what times your website has the most traffic, and even what content people click the most and most often. And when you run a website, this is definitely one of the most important tools to have, as it really lets you optimize and understand who your audience is and how to bring that content to the forefront of your website. Also, they let you integrate a domain you already own, or you can just purchase a domain right through Squarespace. So if you want to check out Squarespace and purchase your own domain, go to squarespace.com/rocketsloth and get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using code ROCKETSLOTH. Going on to Kikowani Station, this one's pretty easy and there's more advanced versions out there, but if you want to get a very nice, beautiful view of the burning city, you know, whether you're trying to take someone on their first date or you just want to enjoy something warm and sunset-like with your best of friends, you can take a Banshee and fly it over to this Phantom in this last section right away and boost right on top of the Phantom, and if you time it just perfectly, you can have the Banshee get pushed through the ceiling barrier, allowing you to ride on top of the Phantom just long enough to fly outside of the map. You get a nice little view of what's going on here. You can kind of see the perfect place for stargazing if you wanted to lay down at an angle, because this whole wall is angled really weirdly and you have to walk alongside that, so you can stargaze the city as it burns. I don't know what it is that you guys like to do to find relaxation on your off days. Maybe you like to watch New Mombasa burn. Maybe you like to go swimming on like Delta Halo or something. I don't know, but whatever it is, maybe this is a new one that you need to try out for yourself. Jumping over to Data Hive, this one was actually really interesting because at the end section of the level, you can actually get all the way up on top of the building where Virgil is typically stored. This one's pretty cool because you can look down to where the cutscene is and see a little bit of that area. You also can tell that there are no glyphs that are here, even though this is where the cutscene takes place, and it proves that later on then some engineers came by and put a bunch of glyphs down, reiterating my theory about how Virgil couldn't have been the one to put the glyphs there, but nonetheless, I digress. You can watch that whole video if you don't know what I'm talking about. But anyways, to get out of the map and get up in this section, Tepig showed us this really cool way where you can do a series of head jumps and grenade jumps, kind of getting up into this upper area by the doors. Then you can do a butterfly jump or an elevator jump where one person is jumping and the other person is kind of walking into the corner. Then you can get up onto this platform, and then there's some invisible ceilings that you can walk along or slide along. And then the hardest part is definitely climbing up this last little corner, because there's such a precise and thin line that you have to follow perfectly to get up to that upper level. But as long as one of the people in your squad gets up there, the other persons can just die and respawn, and sure enough, you can continue on and kind of run around in this upper area or just enjoy the sight. And then going into Coastal Highway, when you're driving down the highway, if you position a warthog behind the door at the last part of the highway section, and then you go back into the level and progress and do the firefight area, you can use a gravity hammer you get from one of the brute chieftains to launch a mongoose back in through the way that you came while a player is sitting on it. Then all the players can regroup back up on the main highway and make their way over to the warthog. But essentially from there, you can launch the warthog again and break out of the level altogether, giving you full example to just drive the warthog around outside of the map and just kind of see what's going on the outskirts of Coastal Highway. And it's just a really cool level to end up looking at. This trick is definitely one of the hardest ones out of all the ones that we looked at, but it definitely has some good payoff if you're one of the people like me who always felt like we never fully got to explore Coastal Highway to its fullest extent just because of how linear the level is by design. And of course, a huge thank you to Tepigfet for showing us majority of these outside of the map glitches. Seriously, he spends so much time just studying ODST and just walking us through some of these very complex things that can take quite a while to set up, and we just appreciate his patience with us when Luke and I are practically just really bad at some of the types of stuff like this. You can check out Tepigfet on Halo Creation, link in the description down below. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button down below. Be sure to subscribe also with notifications on, because it means a lot to us, and then you get notified when we upload brand new videos. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at Rocket Elijah for me, or you can follow Luke at Rocket Sloth Luke on Twitter if you want to know what he's up to or whatever. But anyways, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys all next time.